Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an incredibly practical, evidence-informed framework for understanding dementia behaviors. But hey, we're not just going to sit back and be passive observers today. We're going to tackle this with the sharp eye and enthusiasm of a detective cracking a major case. Because, let's face it, when we're dealing with dementia, things are rarely exactly as they first appear.
Let's kick things off with a distressing, but honestly super common caregiver mystery. Imagine this scenario. My mother has started refusing showers. She's pacing in the evening and getting really angry when I try to help, and she wasn't doing this last week. The very first question that pops into our heads is usually, is this just the dementia getting worse? Or maybe, is this a reaction that needs immediate medication? It's a completely natural assumption to make. But as we're going to see, jumping straight to those conclusions can actually blind us to the real solution.
And that brings us to the absolute beating heart of this entire explainer. If you only remember one single thing from our time together today, let it be this. A dementia behavior is a clue, not the diagnosis. Sure, a new or worsening behavior might reflect changes in the brain, but so often it's actually a visible expression of something else entirely. We've got to stop looking at the behavior as the final answer and start treating it like the very first piece of evidence in a much bigger puzzle.
So, here's our roadmap for cracking the case today. First, we'll look at how the behavior is a clue. Then, we'll learn to describe, do not interpret. Third, we'll uncover the 7 hidden clues. Fourth, we'll be reconstructing the scene. And finally, we'll wrap up with the pause action plan.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1. The behavior is a clue, moving from assumption to investigation.
The crucial takeaway we find in the source material is that we literally have to redefine what a behavior actually is. At its core, a behavior is just an observation. It's simply what you can see. We can't assume a sudden change is just the dementia progressing. Most of the time, what looks like resistance or aggression is actually a visible cry for help. It's usually pointing to an unmet physical or emotional need or demand being placed on the person that just totally exceeds their current ability. So our best, most defensible approach isn't to just try and suppress that behavior. It's to put on our detective hats. We need to ask, what changed? What happened right before this? What physical need is struggling to be expressed here?
Moving on to Section 2. Describe, do not interpret. This is essentially the very first rule of any good detective.
I love this comparison because it brilliantly shows the difference between a global label and a real observation. Look at the label side, aggressive during bathing. Okay, sure, that might summarize what it felt like in the moment, but it's assuming intent, and honestly, it tells us absolutely nothing about why it happened. Now look at the precise observation on the right. Grimaced, pulled away, yelled stop. See the difference? By swapping out that unhelpful label for observable facts, we suddenly make things like pain, fear, or maybe a really jarring environment so much easier to evaluate. Always describe the scene before you try to interpret it.
Okay, Section 3, the 7 hidden clues. Let's round up the usual suspects.
You might be surprised to see just how wide-ranging these 7 hidden contributors actually are. We're talking about everything from untreated physical pain and sudden acute illness, all the way over to medication effects, sensory problems, task overload, a feeling of fear or loss of control, and finally, issues with the environment, timing, and routine. Literally any single one of these, or a combination of a few, can trigger a severe behavioral response. Let's break these suspects down and see exactly how our detective responds to each one.
For our first 3 clues, we're looking at physical suspects. People with dementia often can't use words to pinpoint their pain, so it's going to show up as grimacing, guarding a body part, or yelling. If you suspect pain, the practical response is to stop whatever task is provoking it, observe them closely, and seek a clinical assessment. Just remember, don't try to diagnose the medical issue solely from the behavior. Now, what about acute illness? If you see a sudden or fluctuating change in attention or mobility, that could actually be an infection or delirium, which requires prompt medical evaluation. Do not wait around for days logging this behavior. Get a clinician involved right away. And as for medications, always reconcile what they're taking with a pharmacist to check for interactions. But crucial limit here, never, ever stop a prescribed medication on your own without clinician guidance.
Our next 2 suspects are all about how the person is processing the world around them. Sensory problems, things like harsh glare, poor visual contrast, or chaotic background noise can make a totally familiar task feel absolutely terrifying. The fix here? Improve the lighting, make sure hearing aids actually work, and carefully test out environmental changes. Then we have task overload. We might think we're just giving simple help, but firing off rapid instructions can completely overwhelm someone with dementia. The solution is to adapt the task to the abilities they still have. Break it down to one visible step at a time. Use one cue and significantly slow down your pace. And please, do not turn daily interactions into a memory test for things they've lost.
Finally, let's look at fear, loss of control, and the environment. Activities like bathing or dressing involve a lot of intimate physical contact. If the person doesn't understand your intent, they are going to experience your help as a literal threat. Their resistance is a protective response. So always ask permission before touching them, fiercely protect their privacy, and offer simple choices. As for the environment and timing, try to adjust the daily routine to match when they have the most energy. A disrupted routine or late-day fatigue can totally wipe out their capacity to cope. Just remember, these patterns are hypotheses to test, not absolute proof.
Let's put this into practice with Section 4, Reconstructing the Scene. We're going to solve the mystery of the shower. Bringing it back to our opening mystery, the mother refusing the shower, let's see what happens when we reconstruct the event using our new framework. Remember our golden rule: a dementia behavior is a clue, not the diagnosis. So we're tossing out the label angry and using precise observations instead. Look at this first event. Observation: she refuses to lift her arm during undressing. The possible clue? Pain or limited motion. Suddenly, it's not aggression at all. We need to look at her facial expressions and check for arthritis or shoulder pain. Second observation: she looks down and stops dead at the bathroom entrance. Possible clue? Visual misperception. We need to check the lighting and contrast. Is there a dark bath mat on the floor? Because to someone with altered depth perception, a dark mat can literally look like a terrifying bottomless hole in the ground.
Let's keep reconstructing. Next observation: she yells after receiving several rapid instructions. The clue here is pretty clearly task overload. We need to assess the number of steps we're asking for, our pace, and any competing noise. And finally, she pushes the caregiver away when her clothing is being removed. The clue? Fear, a need for privacy, or feeling a loss of control. This brilliantly illustrates a massive breakthrough from the research. The behavior was multifactorial. It was a combination of a cold bathroom, a dark mat she couldn't visually interpret, shoulder pain making undressing agonizing, and a caregiver rushing through the motions. Which means the solution is changing the routine, modifying the environment, and assessing that pain, not just reaching for a generic behavior-suppressing pill.
All right, let's bring it all together in Section 5, the Pause Action Plan. This is your practical detective framework.
To help you actually apply this every single day, we've got a highly actionable framework called the Pause Action Plan. It goes like this. P stands for Protect. You always address any immediate danger, like fall risks or severe symptoms first. A is for Assess Acute Change. Ask yourself, is this behavior entirely new or suddenly much worse? U is for Understand the Episode. Describe exactly what happened, step by step, without using unhelpful labels. S is for Search the 7 clues. Run through our usual suspects like pain, task overload, or the environment. And E stands for Experiment and Evaluate. Make 1 or 2 safe, person-centered changes and observe how they respond. The source material emphasizes using non-drug, person-centered approaches like this as your absolute first-line response for non-emergency symptoms.
But, and this is absolutely crucial, we have to be crystal clear on the guardrails of the pause plan. You should never use this framework to delay a medical evaluation if you spot any of these urgent red flags. We're talking about signs of a stroke, severe breathing problems or chest pain, uncontrolled bleeding, falls or head injuries, an inability to maintain basic safety, or a sudden, markedly worse change in cognition or alertness. These are straight-up medical emergencies. While we always want to investigate behaviors, we literally never ignore acute medical changes that threaten a person's basic physical safety. Which brings us to this incredibly critical rule. Do not just assume sudden confusion is the dementia progressing. A sudden or rapidly fluctuating state of confusion could very well be delirium, which is an acute medical problem like a hidden infection or medication toxicity. Dementia generally changes gradually over months and years. Sudden, overnight changes are a huge red flag and deserve prompt medical evaluation, plain and simple. As you step into this new role of the dementia detective, armed with your pause framework, I want to leave you with one final, empowering thought. Simply remembering our core rule that a dementia behavior is a clue, not the diagnosis, honestly changes everything. It strips away that feeling of helplessness and gives you a clear, actionable path forward.
So I'll leave you with this question. The next time you face a challenging behavior, are you just going to try to stop it, or will you take a breath and ask yourself, what is this clue trying to tell me? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy investigating.
I hope that you found this video helpful. And if you're caring for someone with dementia, I know how actually overwhelming it can be. There's a new free dementia care program through Medicare that a lot of people actually don't even know about. And it can support you, including up to $2,500 for something called respite care, for things like having a private duty home care in your house, helping taking care of your loved one. Or imagine having a 24/7 support helpline. Now, if you want to see if you qualify, go to the website that you see on your screen or scan the QR code that you see. Talk to you soon.